And I don't know how you want to classify that. But the statement about family separation policy not being there, my colleagues have talked a lot about that. That statement that you made earned 4 Pinocchios in the fact-checking world. The statement that you made about 10% of asylum seekers having success is simply incorrect on many fronts, including that it doesn't take into account the effective legal counsel that is provided. When it's provided, those numbers go way up. If it's not provided, they go way down. The statement that you made that families were given the choice to be deported with their children and chose to leave their children behind is simply not true. Evidence presented in the court by the ACLU and judged credible by the attorney, by the judge, as well as statements from the Office of the Inspector General, make it clear that those procedures simply did not allow a meaningful way for families to weigh in. So all of that has been difficult, but equally difficult is I was the first member of Congress to actually go into a federal prison and visit twice with 276, I think, women and some men who had had their children ripped away from them, had not been able to talk to their children in weeks, did not know where their children were. And then later, I spent, and those mothers talked about what they were escaping and the sacrifices they made. And later, I was at the Tijuana side of the border and talking to Hondurans, a young man, Madam Secretary, who was 16, I think, who had gunshot wounds in both his knees and had fled and had taped messages on his phone from his mother saying, "You cannot come back here, you will be killed." So the idea that these are illegal immigrants, first of all, they haven't even entered the country. Secondly, many of these people are fleeing deplorable conditions in other parts of the world. And your administration actually ended a program that was the Central American Minors Program that permitted children with parents lawfully present in the United States to effectively apply for refugee status from their home country. That shut out 2,714 children who had been granted conditional approval. The Trump administration ended that program. If you're so concerned about those young people, will you commit to restarting that very effective program?
The problem with that program is, first of all, it was a category.
I'm sorry. I'm going to take that as a no and ask you to please give me a written answer, just so just because I'm so limited on time. Let me just talk about deaths in detention in private prisons. Last week, ABC News aired an investigation alleging that improper medical care in DHS detention facilities may have contributed to the death of Gerardo Cruz. Mr. Cruz entered DHS custody in full health. In the following days, he began displaying flu-like symptoms, and his condition visibly worsened over the course of a few weeks until he eventually died from complications of pneumonia. Are you aware of Mr. Cruz's story?
Yes, ma'am. I do not have all the facts in front of me, though, but yes.
And are you aware, and I think you may have answered this question, but are you aware of how many people have died in DHS custody since 2010? I recognize that was prior to your time.
I do not have that number, but happy to give it to you.
Let me tell you the number. It's 81 people have died in DHS custody since 2010. Secretary Nielsen, according to a 2018 report by Human Rights Watch, which reviewed the 52 publicly available death reports, almost half of those deaths were linked to substandard care. And Americans are still reeling from the tragic death of Jacqueline Call, who died in Border Patrol custody. As the Secretary of Homeland Security, you oversee all of the facilities in which these negligent deaths have occurred. Can you assure this committee that not a single additional death will result because of negligence on the part of your agency?
I can assure you that I hold the men and women of DHS accountable, and that we are always consistently reviewing. We have some of the highest standards in the world, as you know, but our goal is always to take care of those in our custody.
Thank you. And yet, there have been at least 12 deaths under your watch, including a suicide at the Northwest Detention Center, which is just south of my district. And that death is being currently investigated. I heard you say one death is too many. I'm not asking how many you were responsible for. I'm asking you to promise that there won't be another death under your watch.
You have my commitment to ensure that all of our detention centers take good care of those in our care.
And so have you told your facilities that they will no longer receive funding if they don't institute a basic standard of medical care? What have you done to actually ensure medical care in these facilities?
Yeah, so we can.
And I'm sorry, I realize I'm out of time and I have one more question around.
I'm sorry, that's not going to be allowed. The secretary can answer the last question if she'd like, and then we have to turn to the other folks because she has to leave.
Understood.
And we have votes on the floor, so thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman.
It's okay.
I will now turn to Ms. Handel.
She didn't answer that question though.
We're going to
I'm
turn to
trying
Ms.
to let your colleagues speak. Do you
No,
want
I
me to?
know, but you do
Oh.
have the responsibility to answer my question, which
Okay.
was asked before my time was up.
I'm sorry.
So the question was, have you told the facilities that they will no longer receive funding if they do not institute a basic standard of medical care?
I don't see how taking away funding is going to help the situation, but what I have told them is that we will continue to work to make sure that we uphold the strongest standards, that we have the oversight. As you know, we welcome in NGOs all the time, whether it's UNHCR, whether it's the Red Cross, whether it's other part of the UNs to check. We work with the private sector, we bring in experts, we constantly assess what our detention facilities are like, and we will continue to do that to
Well, I
make
look
sure.
forward to receiving a
The time has expired. The gentlewoman from Georgia, Ms. Handel, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Secretary Nielsen, for being here. I appreciate your service and that of all of your colleagues at Homeland Security.